what you're instilling in the organization is it's okay to try something and fail, because through failure comes learning, comes hope, and then comes breakthroughs.
Welcome to the Curious Advantage podcast, an exploration of the idea of curiosity and its increasing importance for thriving in the digital age, from the authors of The Curious Advantage.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Curious Advantage podcast. This series is about how individuals and organisations use the power of curiosity to drive success in their lives and businesses, especially in the context of our new digital reality. It brings to life the latest understanding from neuroscience, anthropology, history, business and behaviourism about curiosity and makes these useful for everyone. My name is Simon Brown. I'm one of the co-authors of the Curious Advantage book, and today I'm here with my co-authors Paul Ashcroft.
Hello.
And Garrick Jones.
Hi there.
And we're delighted to be joined by Dan Pontefract. Dan is a leadership strategist, thinker, keynote speaker, and best-selling author, with 25 plus years of experience helping leaders and organisations shift to higher levels of employee engagement, productivity, and bottom-line results. Dan knows what it takes to make change happen. He has a very long list of awards to his name, including Learning Leader of the Year and various Brandon Hall Gold Awards. He's appeared on the front cover of Training and Development magazine and Chief Learning Officer magazine, and writes for Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and the Huffington Post. And he's delivered 4 different TED Talks as well as over 300 keynote speeches. He's an adjunct professor at the University of Victoria Gustafsson School of Business, and he's the best-selling author of 4 books, his latest of which, Lead, Care, Win, describes how to become a leader who matters. Welcome to the Curious Advantage podcast, Dan.
Simon, so good to hear your voice after a few years. We go back a ways, and Garrick and Paul, lovely to meet you. Let's get on with it. And by the way, it's great to be here with a few Brits. You're the folks that know how to enunciate my last name properly, given I was born up in the northwest of this lovely country of England.
Fantastic. I'll do my best to keep pronouncing it properly.
Pontefract, isn't that where they have a sweet stuff that you get to climb up a mountain? Isn't that where that comes from?
We call it black licorice, if you're talking sweet stuff, Garrick. Yeah, up in York, the town of Pontefract, which has a very derelict castle, as it turns out. And every time I show up, there's a red carpet because I think there's 11 Pontefracts left in the world. Also known for black licorice in that part of the world. So if anything, I would call myself sweet, Garrick.
Beautiful.
So I had the pleasure of first meeting Dan and hearing him speak at a conference back in 2013 in the US when he was Chief Learning Officer at TELUS. And I remember them being very impressed at how he was driving innovation in learning for over 40,000 people. He's since published several more books, and I'm very excited to hear more on what he's been up to. So, Dan, let's kick off by hearing a bit more about your latest book. So Amy Edmondson describes it as an invaluable roadmap, and Francesca Gino says it's a detailed blueprint that will categorically improve your ability to lead both yourself and others. So can you tell us more on what it's about?
Well, I suppose the title is a great way to start. Lead, Care, Win. I was mucking about and I thought maybe I should write a book called Lead, Scare, Win, because that's you just had to put an S in the front of care, and there you go. That's basically how leadership's working these days, I would argue. In all seriousness, I like titling books with a little bit of play on words and having the reader find their way through the book of what I'm actually on about. And the subtitle is How to Become a Leader Who Matters. So if you unpack some of the words, a leader who matters, well, to what, to whom, why? So leave it there as a punchline to be determined. And then you think about lead, care, win for a second. Well, how can you possibly win if you care? So the point I'm trying to make is, well, what are you trying to win? And what matters?
Yep.
So what you're trying to win, ultimately, through the 9 kind of leadership lessons, if you will, in the book. Sidebar, I didn't even call the book chapters. They're actually lessons. So it's not chapter 1, it's lesson 1, right? But what are you trying to win? You're trying to win the hearts and minds of your people by caring. And caring is almost like a dodgy word, because it's not just about hugs and affection. There's more to it, obviously. You must care in your leadership. And there go, that becomes someone who matters to the people you serve, whether that is the employees or suppliers or partners or customers. So it's your stakeholders. Could be the community, right? Could be the environment, the people that you're trying to help create a better, greener, more sustainable planet. So matters and care are kind of the two key words there. But the kind of outlier is win. And it's not about winning in terms of profitability, EBITDA, although those are important. I guess I over these years of experience, and it turns out as of this recording, in 3 days, I turned 50. So I'm at that tipping point. I intend to live, boys, until 100. So I'm at the tipping point again this coming weekend. And I'm kind of
happy birthday.
Indeed, happy birthday
That's
this
right.
weekend. Yeah.
Well,
I think Paul shares a similar desire to live until 100 or so. I'm hoping to get to 95 myself. My doctor says if I get to 65, I'll be able to get to 85. He told me that last week.
Well, lovely, I suppose. It's like, the Beatles song "When I'm 64" comes to mind, because that whole year I'd be stressed out. Like,
Quite.
I better get to 65. Anyway, it's about hearts and minds. But when I say hearts and minds, it's not just about hugs. You have to be clear. You have to involve in strategy. You have to be proactive in communication. You have to, as one of the lessons calls out, command clarity. But at the same time, you have to be caring in your benevolence and how you know people at work, know about their kids' football clubs that they're with, or if they like the ballet, or whatever the case may be. It's just it's time for a humanistic level of leadership, but at the same time, knowing you've got to get stuff done. Let's just be better balanced with it.
And you wrote the book, I think, before COVID, didn't you? But I'm assuming that those lessons have probably become even more relevant in light of the pandemic and people being sort of cut off from their workmates, and that those lessons are even more poignant. Is that the case?
Yeah. So the book started its kind of writing path roughly 2017, because I think, books take a while, right? For me, at least, because I pick at it and I put it down. I might start another book. I've always got a labyrinth of writing going on. So the book, more or less, I'd say was about 80-90% done. And then, the infamous March 11th day came about, when it seemed like the world fell off a cliff. Basically, over those deer in headlight couple weeks, we and the publisher had a decision to make: push out the announced date of the end of September, or kind of double down and say, well, where in the book might I even highlight what I know is going to happen? And I say that not because I'm prescient, but that because at my time at TELUS, and Simon, you know a bit of this, we shifted 28,000 employees to be virtual workers. And that was starting 2009. So I was already well-versed in what was going to happen in a pandemic with people working from home. Most of the world didn't know what was going to happen. And when I don't mean that again pretentiously, it's very un-Canadian of me. But what I did was I went back to the book and said, well, what can I lift up to sort of pronounce where some of these kind of caring type of leadership lessons might actually be applicable in a pandemic, whilst we might be working in different ways.
Dan, you have a lesson specifically on curiosity. Can you tell us your thoughts on why curiosity is important for leaders and what your research told us?
I was just thinking about your lad's books and all the work you've been doing. I'm like, I got to pay homage, obviously.
You've got to have something on curiosity in there.
Good man.
Yeah. Well, whether at Novartis or wherever, organizations who do not have a curiosity gene, and B, a strong linkage of the curiosity gene to a almost like Peter Senge learning like culture, I find horrifically wrong, and I find relates in my research and kind of sleuthing to those related disengagement factors, attrition issues, innovation issues, et cetera. So the curiosity advantage, what I call remain curious as one of the 9 lessons, is homage to that culture of curiosity, that leader who instills a systemic behavior of learning that's proactive, not reactive. And that's very key, Paul, because far too much training out there is, hey, go take this course, very reactive. But when it's a systemic, proactive curiosity gene, what you're instilling in the organization is it's okay to try something and fail, because through failure comes learning, comes hope, and then comes breakthroughs. And so whether, I think I pay homage in the book to Malala. Malala is someone who not only is just genuinely curious, she was pushing the curiosity button for females in Pakistan to learn, and literally took a bullet to the head because of her passion to help others with their curiosity advantage or quotient, if you will. And so if you could take a little bit of Malala and put that into leaders across organizations, not at the chief learning officer level, although important, but at, managers of frontline team members, of directors of larger groups, good gosh, could you conquer? So, you had me at hello with your work and as they say, total alignment as one of the 9 lessons.
Well, you've also got me because you talk about, Peter Senge, who I'm a huge fan of and have been for years. And, he talked about the learning organization way before anybody else, and also gave us tools about how you create a system for doing that. And the thing that's interesting, that since Peter wrote that book and since his people in Cambridge were doing all that work, we've got digital. We suddenly have social media. We suddenly have a completely different world in which learning takes place. And yet I still think that his principles still apply. I mean, what do you think about curiosity and why it's so important in the digital world?
Well, first of all, Senge is to curiosity and learning as Drucker is to management and leadership.
Oh, great point.
I've never said that before, but that certainly sounds like a pretty cool tweet to put out there. So there you go.
We'll have to quote you on that.
Exactly,
one.
You can have that one.
But it sort of dawned on me as that's what podcasts are awesome about. You can go extemporaneous and some things come out of your head. You're like, oh, that was pretty cool, Dan. But seriously, Garrick, when we kind of miss the plot of the technology is that we are using it in absentia of behavior. And so Senge, like Drucker, very much yelled from the hilltops that, each of their 2 domains, learning and leadership, is about behavior. And when behavior becomes habitual and thus part of a process that all of the organization get on board with, or a unit or a team, that's when breakthroughs happen. And so to me, you can't have one without the other, i.e. learning without leadership, leadership without learning. And as Simon knows, I mean, I didn't put this in this book, but when Simon and I met, I had just published my first book, and it's not it's not me trying to pimp out something on my back catalog. But within that first book was a model that I used at TELUS called the pervasive learning model. And the pervasive learning model is really simple. It just basically says, hey, leaders, learning is equal parts formal, informal, and social, but so is leadership. And leadership has to be equal parts formal, informal, and social. And from the technology perspective, Garrick, that's where the gold is, because you can use the technology to help inform or resuscitate or administer the behaviors of learning and leadership. But you cannot replace behavior simply with technology and hope for the best. Yeah. That's where we fall down.
And for those listening who are leaders themselves or people managers, what advice is in the book around how they can become either better leaders or more curious leaders, or to invoke curiosity within their teams?
I have a really simple, acronym. Some call it mnemonics, but it's actually based on the word learn. Mm-hmm. And so L starts with lead off with learning. So lead off, a year, a unit, a meeting, a one-on-one, a performance review, a coaching session. Like, what is it that you or the team get into the habit of, well, what are we learning? Like, what can we learn? So it's like putting it on the table and saying, if you lead off with learning, like a cricket match with a wicket, like, it's just like, can you get that as a behavior going? The second one, again, pays homage to one of the other lessons, which is called Dare to Share, but it's engage others. So if you want to learn, you can't learn in isolation. Now, yes, you can read a book, and yes, you could listen to a podcast, and yes, there is learning in isolation. But when you do engage others and tend to the network like a gardener does the garden with water and fertilizer, etc., when you're tending to that network and you engage with it, gosh, can you learn a whole bunch of things, right? The third one, A of learn, is adapt. Now, it sounds simple, but it's not. So when, again, paying homage to another of the lessons, embrace change, when you adapt, you're keeping open, right, to what's plausible, what's out there, what is it that I can do to, nudge? What is it that I can do to, basically say, well, we've tried it. That's cool. Maybe we could go and do it a different way. And so the whole adaptation piece is just so key. And then, when we're talking about, where are we at now? R.
Yep.
I was like, what number are we at here? That's called reinforce. So reinforce, it again, as a recovering CLO, and Simon, you may be aware of this. When organizations do what I call spray and pray, so they send people out to courses or e-learning and they just spray it at them and they hope for the best. They pray that something is stuck. Mm-hmm. That is not a learning strategy, is it? Yeah. So again, we have to teach leaders and leaders to teach their teams how, when they do learn something, to reinforce it into their habits. Otherwise, it's one and done. And that really, is an issue for me. And then the last one, the N of learn, is something I call nurture forward. And so to nurture forward is just a funny way in which to get the N of learn in there. And that is to teach back to someone, i.e. nurture your learning forward to someone else. Because as we know, psychologists have proven that when you are teaching something, a new concept to someone else, it actually has a greater tendency to stick with you in your brain and become a habit. So the learn and those 5 kind of curiosity pieces is, again, the synchronicity between the curiosity mindset, but actually having habits and tactics in which to learn and keep the curiosity up.
I love that. So L, lead off with learning, E, engage others, A, adapt, R, reinforce, and N, nurture forward.
There you go.
And that fits so well with some of the things that we talk about, the research we've done, some of the discussions on the podcast around how the leader can make or break the curiosity in the team, and some of the data we've had around the difference between a favourable leader and an unfavourable leader, and a 22-point difference in the curiosity in the team based on those. And also when we were talking to Stefan van Hoedonk, he was sharing around how leaders that learn more, their teams also learn more. So that leading off with learning, creating that habit, creating that culture where the team sees the leader learning and therefore embraces it and learns themselves, absolutely pays off. So I love those.
Spot on.
Dan, to pick off the E of learn there, engage.
Yeah.
In the Flat Army, you write about how to create a connected and engaged organization. What are some of the key messages listeners could take away from that for us? Could you share?
Paul, you're so kind. I mean, you're bringing up the back catalog. It feels like,
wow.
All of a sudden now back to being the rookie in the 2013 tour. Remember when we used to tour?
Old school.
Old school. Used to see people face to face. Yes, indeed. Paul, it's a good question, and thank you for bringing that up, because almost the entirety of Flat Army was about how that team or organization ought to be more collaborative, and back to Garrick's point, with technology, but also without. And it's a behavioral book. Flat Army itself, which is a weird title, I like etymology, and army, of course, comes from the Latin armada. Armada, of course, is from flotilla, and flotilla, of course, is a bunch of boats sailing together from point A to point B, each boat with its own captain, and a team that is kind of navigating the waters to actually get to point B. Hence, if you're flat in the organizational culture, yet still have a hierarchy in the boat, but with an openness and a collaboration to get from point A to point B, that's the metaphor of all metaphors in my little brain. And so hence the title of the book. So Paul, to the point then about, bringing it back to engage.
Well, as you go to engage, I just want to reflect on the idea there about in the Curious Advantage, we talk about sailing the 7 seas of curiosity for similar points, right? So I think there's a
nautical theme today, yes.
My favorite band in Canada is called the Tragically Hip. One of their best songs is called Nautical Disaster. And we're just trying to be the opposite of that. This is not a disaster. We're trying to use the C's to teach people how to be curious, right? Yeah.
So engage.
Exactly. Back to engage, right? Like, where were we? Right. So that collaboration gene is really what I'm getting at about engage, right? About that tending of the network to build others. So, one of the other tactics I use in the Flat Army is called the clam. I guess you can get clams in the ocean, so we'll run with the metaphor, right?
Yep.
CLAM stands for, I should say, Collaborative Leader Action Model. And so what's Collaborative Leader Action Model? Where it's the 6 C's. I'm not kidding. But it's the letter C. So
it's the extra one that makes all the difference.
Yeah. Well, I'm told now that there's like an extra ocean that the geographic councils have come up with. So I'm really curious as to what's going on with our...
That messes it all up now. We'll have to change the model.
So you connect with people first. So that's kind of the reach out part. You consider options as a group. You communicate the decision. So we're on the third C there. You create the result. You confirm what it is that you said you were going to do is in fact what has happened. So you evaluate effectively. And then the 6th C is you celebrate, about what it is that you all went through. So that whole collaborative leader action model, Paul, which pays homage, I would argue, to the engage part of the learn model inside of the remain curious link to these 2 books, right, is again about what are you doing as a leader or even as a individual contributor to reach out first. So connect with others, consider what's at your disposal. And that again is back to behavior. Far too many people, back to the clam for a second, Paul, jump to create. Or they jump to execute, or they jump to, I already know everything it is that I need to know, so let's go do this. And as you guys all know all too well, with your research, your book, and just everything that you've done in your careers, if you cut off the curiosity drip, if you cut off that pipeline, what happens to that network? What happens to the intellect? What happens to the possibilities or the ideas? They get stunted, or they're no longer there, or they just don't show up. And we know what is the regression analysis that occurs when all of that doesn't happen. So, long-windedly, Paul, the relationship between engage and collaboration is just so pertinent. And if leaders could just get their heads out of their arses from not being proactive in their collaboration or their engagement levels, I think we'd be in a far better place.
You're listening to the Curious Advantage podcast, inspired by the book The Curious Advantage, written by Paul Ashcroft, Simon Brown, and Garrick Jones. Subscribe to the podcast today.
And you talk about networks and community and how important that is for us as well. I mean, if you're going to be curious about anything, one of the things about understanding context and learning new language, you get that from other people. Yes, you can get it from books, but essentially, if you're curious, the wider the group of people you can engage with initially, the more information you're going to get, the more you're going to know where you need to focus. And so for us as well, I mean, community is so powerful and so important and so facilitated these days by the digital realm as well. I mean, I can go on about that, but I really want to ask you this. I'm curious. You spent many years as a successful CLO. You were at TELUS, and you were recognized for your great achievements there. And here's the one, including delivery of $300 million of benefits from your MBA program. Can you share some of your highlights? What was that all about?
Man, I love when people are prepared. So the short story is in 2013, as CLO, I was looking at the budget. I was looking at where we spending money. I was looking at, learning costs, as anyone would and should as a CLO. Not to cut costs, which is curious, right? And I recognize by doing a deeper dive into the various budgets across all the business units that there was about $1 million Canadian dollars a year being spent on a variety of higher education. MBAs, executive MBAs, MAs, like a bunch of master stuff. And it's not that I wasn't against it. My idea was, well, wait a second, what's the return on all of that money spent? What is actually TELUS gaining? Okay, some individuals are smarter. They've applied some of those learnings. We've got a bunch of design thinkers. Great. Now what? So my theory was, well, what if we could not necessarily cut off all of that funding, but take a lot of it or some of it, and maybe if I, from the corporate learning budget, was able to chip into it as well, maybe we could, have our own MBA. Not that we would create it, but be in partnership with a school of business somewhere across Canada, and then come up with like a curricula co-created with obviously smart professors, et cetera, that actually served the interests of TELUS better, but also educated that team member. And so the high-flying idea was, okay, what if we made this investment, but then when you've got 20 or 25 people working together in 2 years, there's got to be things that they could be tackling as a group that actually benefits the organization.
And how did you hack that? How did you get them to connect with the organization?
Well, the first thing I did was I went to the CEO and he laughed me out of the office. He said, "This is the stupidest idea ever. What are you thinking about?" A year later, I got a call back and he said, that stupid idea, it's actually pretty good. So let's go do it. So sometimes, I guess part of this podcast is, how does curiosity happen? Sometimes you have to plant seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really an attempt for me to plant a seed, knowing he probably would say no right away. So a year later, got the green light. We go across Canada. We ask universities to pitch their ideas. We center on one. So after cohort 1, which started in 2015 and ended 2017, that's where, Garrick, you'd found the details. Through the final projects and a couple of the mini projects that happened within the 2 years, we found $300 million of either savings through some of the projects or a net new business. Now, that was circa 2017. That we actually created an entire business unit out of that first cohort called AgTech, originally called Smart Farms, now called AgTech. And it's doing millions of dollars of business for TELUS because these people came up with an idea that said, well, how do we help farmers, growers, et cetera, with technology in a way in which that could provide TELUS some benefit? Now, fast forward, even though I left TELUS full time in December of 2018, the CEO asked me back immediately and said, look, on a kind of retainer, can you continue to run this thing for us so that we continue to accrue the benefit? So I'm still involved with the organization as a director of this program. We are just admitting our 4th cohort, Garrick, this October into the model. And we have...
I'll confess.
Yeah.
I'll confess why I'm fascinated by this, because I also teach at the London School of Economics. And one of the things we've been trying to do over the last 10 years there is to really get learning shifting from just being theory and ideology or theory and academic work to practical stuff where you can apply it. And I'm very happy that, over the last 10 years, we've introduced a number of capstone projects, over 8 in different areas, where we put, students through theory in their first couple of terms, and then we connect them up with organizations so they can apply it and have some real life experience. The problem, of course, is that it's such a short time that they're in the real world. Yes, they learn some stuff. And I always wonder about how can we add more value to the organizations we're working with. And one of the things that you're telling me is that it comes from the other side. You almost have a permanent relationship with the organization and with the academy, so that these ideas are filtering into the real life of the business. Is that, am I understanding?
That is exactly it. So now, in hindsight, I look like sort of a brilliant, prescient, CLO back in the day. And maybe that's warranted, but I just thought that you've got to have a better return on investment, surely, when you put 20 or 25 people in a room. And I guess it's proving its point. But what I'm seeing as well is that, back to Paul's point, right, earlier about engagement or engaging others in collaboration, the networks that are being created between cohort 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then this sort of labyrinth and spider web of loose ties, weak ties, sometimes they're called, and strength-based ties, because of the MBA. It's like creating ripples throughout the organization. Because I'm directly still plugged into it, I feel and see it every day. So what I don't understand, Garrick, is I don't see other organizations doing this. I don't, and which is weird. I would be doing it.
okay, here's my question. Are you working with the alumni of those cohorts in the organization? Do you do that formally, or is it informal? How does that work?
Yeah, great question, Garrick. Back to the point of what is leadership and learning, formal, informal, social. So there are formal networking, if you will, and project-based events, opportunities that happen now cross cohorts, as well as some of the informal social bits, from whether it's like WhatsApp channels to, like plugging these people together so that they have this, MBA, TELUS MBA network. And what you're seeing, like, for example, we have, there's TELUS, kind of the Canadian-based telecom, and then there's TELUS International, which is a publicly traded subsidiary to TELUS, which looks after all kinds of things like call centers, BPO, digital technology, digital media. And that has now more team members than TELUS does. It's like circa 55,000 people worldwide. We're now shifting TELUS MBA grads into TELUS International to start infiltrating that organization and to help it see kind of those loose tie and weak tie and strong tie networks that need to be happening. So it's just, eventually it'll be a fascinating case study to write.
The MBA is a fascinating one. I know recently I was hearing another or a professional services organisation had offered an MBA to all of their associates, partnering with Ashridge Business School actually on that, who we're working with around a curiosity diagnostic as well. So I think that idea seems to be catching on more as well. From your time there, I mean, you already described yourself as a sort of curious CLO and not afraid to pitch a stupid idea to the CEO, which maybe turned out not to be such a stupid idea, but the creativity of bringing that. Are there any other lessons from your time there that our listeners could take away to learn from, either things that worked or things that you're like, oh God, I can't believe I did that. Everyone else should learn from that and not do that as well, because those things are always really helpful for people to be able to apply.
Well, I'll give you a plus and a minus, a bouquet and a brickbat, as they say. And so the bouquet one is in 2010, whilst in the midst of launching what we call at TELUS flexible work styles. Again, 3 types of modalities, right? You're at home, you're mobile, or you're resident in the office. The TELUS leadership philosophy, this systemic, open, collaborative leadership model that was the bedrock and DNA of how people need to operate, whether you're frontline or in the C-suite. I launched something called, Garrick, you may like this because of your technology question, TELUS Collaboration House, TCH. And in 2010, we were looked at as off our rockers because it was a full-on virtual world. Mm-hmm. We're talking like avatars where you had to, create not 3-headed fish or, sharks with tuxedos, but human beings. I finally could have hair, was fantastic. But we had set up an environment where there were, rooftop decks to have like sales events. We had breakout rooms. We had open offices, if you will, to sort of have, chats along the walks. We had big
when was this done?
2010, exactly.
Oh my God!
So
that's ahead of the curve.
That's exactly my point. Like, and people thought I was crazy. I'm like, no, this is exactly how we can use the leadership model, use TELUS flexible work styles, and the technology as a way in which to show leaders can lead differently, team members can participate differently. And it wasn't, replacing everything and moving it to virtual worlds. It was finding the right spots in which to have a virtual world encounter. For example, induction. Induction at TELUS used to be, like everywhere around the world, it seems, like a 2 or 3 day death by PowerPoint event with muffins and coffee. And so I was like, well, that's dumb. Like, what's the point of that? That's just boring. So we turned it into kind of like a Michael Watkins first 90 days. And sometimes was spent in a virtual world, sometimes was face-to-face, sometimes it was a scavenger hunt, right? You had to go and find stuff and make networks, find someone from another business unit, whatever. Like, it was just, and then there was a scorecard. And so you'd have an absolute scorecard to say, well, where am I in my pursuit of the first 90 days of my time here at TELUS? And it worked. Like, it was really, really good.
That's amazing.
But like, tons of brickbats, like tons of things that failed, because it was just too much for the organization. So, an example was the Grow series, we called it. And this is like starting again, 2010, 2011, 2012, trying to get executives to have basically open mics. And at that time, they're so used to scripts and staying on script.
Yep.
Like trying to coach executives to be open and just like, no script. Like it's audience questions and you'll be able to handle this. Okay. Come on, Chuck. Come on, Sarah. Like this is okay. And, it was very difficult and often painful because it just didn't flow well. And it wasn't grow. It was like ungrow or stunt. Like,
Dan, I want to pick up because I'm really pleased you mentioned hybrid working, and obviously now in particular this year, as we are hopefully gradually getting out of the pandemic, many organizations, let's say, are perhaps reluctantly shifting to a hybrid or a virtual working model. Now, of course, we're seeing different ends of the spectrum, with some firms insisting their people come back into work every day. Some, particularly, more of the flexible consulting like organizations saying it's the end of the office, you can work from wherever you like. What's your view on this, on hybrid work, and what does it mean for leaders, do you think?
Wow. We have another 4 hours to go on this podcast.
I know this. I wanted to ask you about this topic.
It's a doozy question, but it's so pertinent and very appreciated to be asked, Paul. It's everything. So as tragic as the pandemic has been, when you step away from the fog of it, the light of work has changed. And leaders and organizations, particularly senior leaders, need to wake up from their coma and see that we are now what I'm calling in the age of agency. And that age of agency is not going to go away. The genie is out of the bottle. We can't shove her back in. It's impossible. And what does it mean? Well, it means that more than ever in our lifetimes to date, the employee is looking around saying, you know what? This pandemic was horrible. And I'm going to have to make some choices now on my life. People are calling it the summer of the great resignation, like whatever. That's just Wall Street Journal stuff, right? But what I really believe that's happening is people have had 15, 16 months to have an existential crisis on their own in their homes or their flats. And now they're waking up from their own coma and saying, well, what do I want in my life? What's my purpose? What's the meaning of life to me? So that in and of itself is question number one, Paul. Number two then is, well, if my employer is so stupid as to make me come back into the office 5 days a week, have to suffer through the Piccadilly line, I do not want that each and every day. You know what? I do miss people. I certainly hope that my organization adopts a hybrid model where I might come into the office 1, 2, 3 days a week. But for 5 days on the Piccadilly line, forget that. I'm going to go find an organization that does believe in hybrid work. So that's point number two, Paul, right?
So it's a differentiator. It's a differentiator. Right.
Totally. Now, the aforementioned, firms that you're alluding to, PwC, EY, Deloitte, anyone in Canary Wharf, they're all doing a fantastic job of either eliminating the top floor, as HSBC did, and turning it into an employee wellness center and saying, look, we're not going to mandate you 5 days a week, but we would like to have, a 2-3-2 model, 2 days at home, 3 days in the office, 2 day for weekend. I think that makes sense. Those are what I'm advocating for. And I see when organizations are defining a new plot to their organization, they're the ones who are going to be lead, care, win type of organizations. So I'm like privileged as kind of a free agent now to be working with organizations that are actually doing this. But I'm horrified by, as I wrote on Forbes, by organizations like Apple. What in God's name possesses you if you're Tim Cook to mandate people into the office Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays? Like, what inevitable result is that going to occur is employee revolt, not agency.
It might be the $1 billion spent on the donut-shaped building putting Copertina.
Secretly, Garrick, here's my joke about that one, right? So I think they spent $1 billion because eventually, like in the movie Wall-E, we're going to exhaust all resources on this planet. That's a spaceship. That's just going to lift up.
It's the getaway vehicle.
People are still going to need iPhones, so they're just going to make them up in space, and that's where they're going to do it.
Let's hope Elon Musk comes through for us. I've got a different question for you, Dan.
Yeah.
What are you most personally curious about at the moment?
Agency. I alluded to the age of agency. I have gone heads down, knee deep, I guess, launched from a cannon into space with Elon about this notion of agency. And so I am trying to sort of piece together the points and research and just definitions of what does agency mean. And I've kind of come down to 3 types. Let's start working our way up. I alluded to employee agency with Paul's question, right? The age of agency for the employee is, again, voting with their feet, this existential definition of what is it that I want from my life, whether you're 22 or 92. And I think it's really important to remember what we've all gone through, because 7.5 billion people have never all gone through this together. So there is going to be a lot of people who have stepped back, and said, well, now what?
Yeah,
I don't want to go back to whatever pre-normal was, because that assumes normal was normal. This new normal, which is such a nonsensical term, right? It's not a new normal. You're resetting your life. And so there's agency that's enveloping millions of employees right now, I would argue, Garrick. Number 2, I think there's, again, a leader agency that's required. And so that probably touches on a lot of my work from before, but it's coming up with a definition of how does that leader invoke an agency that allows for he or she not only themselves to be autonomous, learned, curious, but how to invoke some of those behaviors for a team that is going to demand that more than ever. I mean, it's like the evolution of what I thought was a kind of a culture book in Flat Army. We're talking about a way of life in the age of agency, right? And then the third one, of course, would be the organization. So where does the organization find its agency now? How does it define that and enact it? It's not just purpose. There's more to it. Now, I haven't figured out what the correct answer to all of those, but that's where I'm into right now, Garrick. Thank you for the question.
Fascinating.
So we're coming up to our closing question, and what a journey you've taken us through. So how to become a leader who matters. Looking at the quote we will quote you on of Senge is to curiosity and learning what Drucker is to management thinking. I think we're going to have to weave that in somewhere. We've heard about your pervasive learning model of formal, informal, and social. The acronym of LEARN, so leading off with learning, engaging others, adapt, reinforce, and nurture forward. We've learned there's a 6 C's model that can also go with our 7 C's model. And in fact, someone even suggested an 8th C for our model the other day. So we need to look at our numbers. And then heard about your experience at TELUS as well, and the success of the MBA program, and significant savings, including even creating a new business unit, and then learnings of virtual worlds and some of the brickbats along the way as well. And then finally, age of agency. So if there was one thing from all of that or outside that you'd like to leave our listeners with, Dan, what would it be?
Well, in this age of agency, if I will, and curiosity and the quotient that I think is required there, I'll say this. I still believe that each of us need a North Star, like a declaration of why we stand for what we stand for and how we want to operate each and every day. This actually would be a great articulation exercise for people to connect not what they're passionate about, but what they stand for. There's difference there, right? I don't believe in passion. I believe in purpose, hence the declaration of purpose. So it's like a 1-line, 2-line pithy statement that could align with your curiosity. It could align with your DNA. Mine is as follows, Simon. We're not here to see through each other. We're here to see each other through.
Love it.
And that line guides me to be curious, to be collaborative, to look behind doors, to say sorry when I make a mistake. It just acts as my DNA, if you will, my rock. So I would encourage people to write something that they stand for and live up to that each and every day.
Fantastic. So we're not here to see through each other. We're here to see each other through. So wise words indeed. Thank you, Dan. So a question for all of our listeners, take away from this, what do you stand for? What could be your North Star, one to reflect upon? And we'd love to hear from you. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Really appreciate you joining. Do check out Dan's books, TED Talks and articles. He also has a set of online courses available that support his latest book as well, Lead, Care, Win, available on www.danpontefract.com, and also I think all leading booksellers as well. So thank you again, Dan.
My pleasure, gents. Really great conversation. And I hope, if anything, someone tells me that Paul Simon's middle name is Garrick, then you guys could be the Paul Garrick Simon gang.
We got stories about that for another time.
So you've been listening to a Curious Advantage podcast. We're always curious to hear from you. If you think there was something useful or valuable from this conversation, we do encourage you to write a review for the podcast on your preferred channel, saying what it was that you learnt. And we'd love to hear from you. Join the conversation with hashtag Curious Advantage. Curious Advantage book is available on Amazon worldwide. Order your copy now to further explore the 7 C's or 6 C's or 8 C's, but no, the 7 C's model for being more curious. Subscribe today. Keep exploring curiously. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Curious Advantage podcast. The Curious Advantage book is now available to purchase on Amazon. Stay tuned for the next episode and keep exploring curiously. This podcast is produced by Aliki Palinelli and John McGinty and edited by Jill Damatak-Futter.